Thanks, Steve, and welcome back, everyone. Hope you've all sorted out a cup of tea and you're sitting in readiness to listen to our second panel. This panel will be looking at other aspects of suicide prevention relevant to the built environment. And again, I'm really excited to hear their contribution. So let me go ahead and introduce the members of panel 2. Dr. Christabel Owens has worked in the field of suicide prevention for over 20 years, and her body of work resulted in the production of the leaflet, It's Safe to Talk About Suicide. Founder of Stigma Statistics, Matthew Steens is using data and tracking technology to prevent suicides, and we'll talk about how Stigma's beacon system monitors unusual and at-risk behaviours on construction sites. Maria Coulter is a non-executive director at the Construction Industry Council and business coach with a career spanning over 20 years in the industry as a quantity surveyor, project manager and risk manager. With 96% of the construction industry made up of SME businesses, Maria will explore how poor design of business systems can lead to anxiety, stress, and in some cases, suicide. And our final speaker will be Jo Kent, who is Suicide Prevention Lead at Humber Coast and Vale Health and Care Partnership and the Humber Mental Health NHS Foundation. And Jo will talk about the work that the Humber area is doing to prevent suicides. And this is really key because I'm sure some of you have seen that the Humber region has featured too prominently in the national newspapers and online news in recent losses of life. So our first speaker, Christabel, if you'd like to start off, please.
I'd just like to start actually by congratulating Steve on this, putting together this amazing event and a fantastic lineup of speakers. I've been hugely impressed by the presentations so far. Really, truly inspiring. So I'm Christabel Owens. I'm an academic social scientist. Retired last year from the University of Exeter after working for more than 20 years in the field of suicide prevention from a public health perspective, as opposed to a clinical, medical, psychiatric perspective, on the grounds that 3/4 of those who take their own lives are not known to have a psychiatric disorder. They're out in the community, in our communities, hidden until it's too late. So could I have my first slide, please, Steve? Thank you. Okay, so I've had a number of strands to my work, but one of them has been very much to do with preventing suicides in public places. These account in England for around 1/3 of suicides, quite surprisingly, which take place outside the home in some sort of public place. So the first piece of guidance in 2006 was commissioned by the National Institute for Mental Health in England. The title of the document was theirs, not mine. They insisted that we look at suicide hotspots, meaning locations that are frequently used and often notorious for suicides. And I fought very hard to get this term dropped, the term suicide hotspots, because I think it's unhelpful and even quite dangerous. And then in 2015, at the invitation of Public Health England, I fully reconceptualized the document, the guidance, resulting in a new practice resource, which went out to all local authority, public health teams and planning departments, crucially. And I introduced in there this notion of designing in. It's interesting, this change of terminology. You're looking at designing out. I talked about designing in, and I might come back to that because I think the distinction is possibly important. So designing in suicide prevention measures to new structures, infrastructure projects, bridges, buildings, transport systems, etc. In the past, we've always been forced to retrofit or bolt on measures once the problem has developed at a site, when really, you're absolutely right, we should be thinking at the very earliest planning and design stages. And the question to ask is, how can we design and build a bridge, a building, whatever it is, in such a way that at the very least, it can never be used as a means of suicide in such a way that it can never facilitate an act of suicide. And this was the approach that they took years and years and years, decades ago, in places like Singapore and other places in the Far East when designing their underground mass transit systems, you know, with sliding screen doors and so on, in such a way that there has never been a suicide on the Singapore underground system. It's simply not possible to step out in front of a train. So, you know, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely bang on with your thinking about designing in, designing out. Thank you. Perfect timing. I just want to offer here just 2 or 3 things to think about based on my research, my experience of working with a large number of local authorities, other agencies, ROSPA, National Trust, Highways England, lots of agencies, both here and around the world. And the first is to think about types of places that pose a risk to suicidal individuals and how they do so. So places that are typically used for suicide are those that offer the actual means of suicide, either by jumping from a height or stepping in front of a moving vehicle. So typically bridges, high buildings, rooftop terraces, railways, cliffs, etc. But to be used for an act of suicide, a place needs to offer 3 things, I think. And they're all key design considerations. Firstly, access. How easily can a suicidal person get to the site? The site itself, and once there, get to the means of suicide, the actual edge or the drop. How can they climb whatever barriers might be put in place? Opportunity is different. Opportunity, I think, is largely to do with timing and observability. So it's things like degree of seclusion. We know that it can take a person some time to work up to an act of suicide, and that people don't wish to be observed during that time. And with very few exceptions, we know that they will not take their life in the presence of another person. So typically places have used CCTV and other surveillance systems to monitor places, but I'm wondering if there are other ways to increase observability, eliminate hiding places, thinking about lighting, thinking about footfall, presence of people. Tom said some lovely things earlier on about bringing people into spaces, and this links up really, really well with my thinking. And finally, appeal, which is quite a difficult one because we really don't know very much at all about why certain places have such appeal to suicidal individuals. We do know that certain places in the world have almost a magnetic attraction for people. There are iconic structures such as the Golden Gate Bridge, some sites here in the UK, so places of global and local importance and reputation. And I think reputation is a very important factor here, that once a place gets a reputation for suicide, it becomes more and more appealing to others. Not yet. Can you go back a bit? Places of natural beauty. Some people want to spend their last hours in a place out in nature, in peace and harmony. But we also get the complete opposite. We get people drawn to the grimmest and most desolate of locations, such as urban multi-story car parks, motorway bridges. And we don't know, as I say, we don't know very much about why certain places appeal. I think it's an area in which much more research is needed, but I've tried and it's not been very easy research to do. So next slide, please.
Thank you. And Christabel, just I know this time goes by very quickly. We're just at the 8 minutes. If we could have another about 60 seconds to move on to the next panelist, that would be wonderful.
Okay, fine. So very quickly, solutions fall very broadly into two types, hard and soft. Hard is very much to do with design and engineering, physical barriers, which are about restricting access to means or blocking the act. We know these work, we know from research that these work very well in terms of thwarting a plan, but they don't necessarily change a suicidal mind. So they must be accompanied by soft solutions, which is about signs, encouraging help seeking, and human contact. Human contact is absolutely vital because it's what the suicidal person needs to draw them back and reconnect them with the world. So bringing in people, opportunity for human intervention. It's not difficult to spot somebody and have a conversation about suicide, but we need human presence and we need to design in human presence. And these two need to go together, putting up barriers, blocking access, but also bringing in people and people with the confidence and skills to have that conversation. So one really good example of this is Highways England, who are looking at design of motorway bridges and what they can do there with barriers, but also training every traffic officer in England to be skilled to have those conversations. Final slide, which I'll be very quick on, Steve.
Okay, Crystal, there we go.
Yes, there we go. And this links up with some of the things I've said already and that actually Tom pointed to earlier. There are two opposing visions of how to prevent suicides on bridges, both bridges that have a long association with suicide. On the left, we see, again, Tom mentioned this earlier, this is traditional thinking of how to prevent for suicide. Erect a cage, block the act of suicide by any means, never mind what it does to the human psyche. Never mind that it creates this sense of entrapment and imprisonment, which very much reflects what's going on, what the suicidal person feels. They feel trapped. Versus on the right, this is an image from a really innovative project in Derry in Northern Ireland, which you may know about. And instead of erecting hard barriers, they're installing some beautiful artwork, sculpture, lighting to transform the spirit of the place from a gloomy, notorious suicide hotspot into somewhere that's truly joyful and uplifting. And it's being done as part of a whole community regeneration scheme. It's really worth looking at if you're not familiar with it. And I did notice in the chat earlier, someone talked about happy stations and happy car parks. It was Louise from Somerset whom I've worked with. And I think that looking at what they're doing at the Foyle Bridge is really interesting.
I think that was a really powerful couple of images at the end, Christabel, to just say, look, what can be done while still protecting people and keep the aesthetics of a structure. But thank you so much. So I just wish we had more time today, but.
Yeah, so I'm really interested to find out how Stigma Beacon system works. So I was really keen for you to be one of our speakers today. And I really look forward to hearing this paper. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and thanks, Steve, very much for having me along. So first of all, how I got into suicide prevention in my story is that I've had my own personal experience with suicide and losing friends and witnessing suicides, and really how it all came about was me looking for how I can have impact using my background in corporate treasury and management consulting. I'm used to looking at data, where's data that supports this decision, where's data or data depending on what hemisphere you're in, and so yeah, I was looking for things to do, and that's really how I got onto real-time surveillance, and that's really how Stigma started. But since then, we kind of thought, well, we're dealing with after the fact. You know, we've got those figures of how people have died, but I think we can go, you know, we can swim upriver with the advances in technology, and, you know, with AI and machine learning and things, we can do a whole lot more. So yeah, really touching on the figures, I suppose I don't need to go into these too much. You know, Steve's already mentioned them. I guess the ones I'll pick out are that, you know, suicide attempts are approximately 30% or 30 times higher than completed suicides. And the other figures I'll throw in is that 51% of multi-storey car parking facilities have experienced a suicide, and bridges make up about 80% of Europe's high-risk locations. So really, now we're moving into behavioural monitoring technology, and we've got to focus on bridges, construction, and multi-storey car parking. So really where we went with this is that nothing currently exists to capture and react to human behaviour. So, you know, we have people watching CCTV cameras, you have people watching locations. You know, you have, I suppose, take somewhere like Beachy Head, you've got chaplains patrolling the cliffs, but you know, all that sort of doesn't really provide the opportunity to do it. And again, we can use technology. You know, taking the work done by British Transport Police and Network Rail, the suicide does have patterns, you know, leading up to and attempting. So on the rail, there's kind of, you know, waiting at one end for several trains to pass, and going down the other end is kind of doing several things. In Australia, they're doing research around what people might do before they jump off a cliff. And so, yeah, our hypothesis is that really that all behaviour follows a pattern. So what we're doing is we're going to monitor those sites and really work out what that at-risk behaviour looks like, because at the moment we don't really know. So part of our solution is about providing that intelligence. So that would lead to, you know, building standards and developing better prevention
All right, everybody, have we lost Matthew, Liz, or have you lost me?
Basically, what we do on the high-risk locations, we have some Internet of Things beacons. So the thing about it is we install these beacons on the high-risk locations, and they do actually look like Wi-Fi routers. It does not require anyone to have anything installed on their phone or anything like. We pick up when a person enters a beacon, it picks up like a smartphone or a wearable. It picks up that piece of tech. It's anonymized and anonymous, so we wouldn't actually know who that person is. And so we take that, and then we're going to develop some tech buzzwords for you. So telematic AI pattern matching technology, and that's really looking at, you know, is it at-risk behavior, or is it normal behavior? And so when there's at-risk behavior, we would then send an alert to, you know, services, or whether it's first responders, police, or someone like, you know, maybe a Beachy Head chaplain, or even the street pastors. But yeah, we think this is really, really exciting, really innovative. You know, turn the innovation dial right up and use the technology there. It doesn't require people to be watching, you know, CCTV cameras and all that kind of thing. Next slide, Steve. So to do this, you know, the usual questions we have is, do people have their smartphone or smart device with them? There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that they do, and some of the research done in Australia is that there's sort of an act of putting down their belongings before they do it, which one of them being a smartphone. How much time do we have to intervene? That's all really dependent on how crowded the location is. So it could be seconds to, you know, a couple of hours there. One of the big things that always comes to mind, and we perhaps don't necessarily like the word tracking, because it isn't tracking as such, it's kind of monitoring in a location, is ethics. So we know that the investigatory, I always get the acronym wrong, the IPCO, Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, has said this technology is legal for suicide prevention and safeguarding. So that's really fantastic. The other thing we're doing is we're going to be really transparent with what we're doing. We're setting up a independent data ethics advisory board, and we'll be forming that soon. But I think really when it comes to designing out suicide, mental health is not static. It's a dynamic, ever-changing thing. So we want to be able to contribute to building standards and providing information around how people are moving in these locations in a dynamic way in real time. And so some of the things we're looking at doing now is contributing to what they call digital twins. So some of the big consultancies have digital twins of buildings, and when they're designing them, to see how they can move around, how people move around, and how you can really design out certain behaviors, at-risk behaviors from there. And we're really excited about that. So where we are at, we are close to starting some pilots, and we're keen to have more areas and more people to partner if anyone else is keen to be involved. But yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity, and feel free to get in touch if anyone's got any questions.
Thank you, Matthew. Really probably some fascinating stuff there to consider. I'm sure that's got everybody's minds thinking about what the opportunities are there with digital and tech. So thank you so much for that. And Liz, I'll just hand back to you as we come over to Maria, and I'll just load Maria's slides up.
Yeah, great talk. I learned a lot, Matthew. That's really interesting. Thank you. I'm someone who knows what the Construction Industry Council is, having been there when they were at the Building Centre in London. So again, I'm interested to see what Maria will talk about. We're all great designers and everything on this call, and I expect none of us ever get stressed or anxious about our work. And I can look around the room to the panelists like we've already seen, and I know that they would say that they get suffer with stress at certain times in delivery of projects, which is why this is a really key presentation for us as well as for everyone else. Thanks, Maria.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different to what we've talked about so far. I'm going to be talking about how we can design out suicide in how we actually do business in the built environment. So I was originally a quantity surveyor and a project manager, as Liz said earlier, and I saw a lot of unfairness in the last recession, and I wanted to influence a culture change, basically. So I decided to train as a coach and then became a coach. And now I work with SMEs and micro businesses, and I help them to grow more profitable, sustainable and happier businesses as well. So I want to talk to you about how the industry is made up. So you might not realise this, but 99.9% of firms in the UK are small, medium enterprises, and actually 83% employ no more than one person. So the current model is mostly micro business and labour-only subcontractors. And I'm wanting to focus specifically on SMEs and micro businesses in this presentation, just to raise awareness as to some of the causes of suicide and how we can design them out as well. But also, the data, it isn't up on these slides at the moment, but recent data from the ONS said that more than 1,400 construction workers took their own lives between 2011 and 2015 as well. So we do know that we've got some big challenges in the industry. Now, there isn't a lot of research and data out there regarding the causes of suicide in business owners, but here's what we do know. So the pressure of being paid late or unfairly is driving business owners in construction to a range of significant mental health problems, and that includes depression and suicide. And this is some data that was carried out. There was a survey by the Electrical Contractors Association and the Building Engineering Services Association as well back in 2019. But they also did this in association with 25 other construction trade bodies as well. So like I say, there isn't a lot of data available, but this is the picture that is they're starting to form. And these are the findings. So 9 in 10 business owners reported mental health issues as a result of late or unfair payment. And these mental health problems included stress, depression, extreme anger, anxiety or panic attacks, insomnia, and suicidal feelings as well. And this issue is affecting CEOs, directors, managers, executives, and of all the respondents, including business owners and employees, 4 said that they had attempted suicide as a result of late payment. And also 4 in 10 respondents said that payment issues had strained their relationship with their partner, and 5% reported that it had caused a breakdown in that relationship entirely as well. We know that cash flow is a massive challenge in our industry. Profit margins are ridiculously low. So the average profit margin for main contractors in 2019 was 2.5%. And if you think about, you know, the work that goes into building these buildings in the built environment, you know, the stress, everything, 2.5% is really, really low. And here's some of the consequences of these really low profit margins, and this is how it's impacted on these small businesses. So here's some examples of what some of my clients have experienced. So this is some of the scenarios. Can you find 30K? So that's something that the contractor's quantity surveyor said to the subcontractor. Now this equates to 20% of a subcontractor's net profit on the project. Can you imagine the impact that that is going to have? Another one is, why is my valuation account undervalued? It's not been looked at fairly. So that's something that the subcontractor said to the contractor's QS. And they've said back, well, don't you do that to your subcontractors as well? And the answer is no, because I mean, if that's passed down, the impact that that would have on the individuals, on their own cash flow, on their livelihoods, on the ability to be able to pay their bills and the mortgage, it just keeps being passed further and further down the supply chain. Other examples, so the program's been pushed back. I don't need it till Tuesday. That could be something that a subcontractor said to another subcontractor. And this could mean a labour-only subcontractor is underpaid by 20% in a week. Now, can you imagine what the knock-on effect would that be, you know, if that was done over a long period of time? And I think pressure is being pushed to people least equipped to deal with it. And that was one of the things that one of my clients said to me this week, sort of based on their experience. So we definitely need a culture change in the industry. And how do we design this out? And one of the things I say to my clients is look at what you can control. I mean, clients, obviously, contractors can't control this, but clients definitely have to have realistic budgets. I remember when I was working as a project manager, working on some really big sort of multi-million-pound projects, and you know, the QS would put together the budget, would go to the meeting and say, right, this is what the budget's coming out as, and they just wouldn't accept it. And because it was over sort of what their sort of budget was, they were just like, well, I don't want to hear that. I don't want to know about it. And obviously, you know, you've then got to try and make a building work within their budget, which is where all of these kind of challenges start. But also, I think consultants and contractors have to understand the consequences of what they're asking. So the quantity surveyors, when they're asking, can you find 30K from a price, you know, what is that impact going to have? If you're delaying payments, if you're shaving off 30K, you know, what impact is that going to have on someone's livelihood, on their mental well-being? You know, you really have to take that into consideration. And also, I think contractors need to look inward as well, because there are processes and procedures that they could be looking at. They could be looking at, you know, how they actually maximise their profit margins to take some of the pressures off what they're experiencing. So how can they use technology? You know, how can they use, you know, pricing differently? How can they improve productivity? But also, obviously, looking at the well-being side of things. And also slow down to speed up. because quite often you'll get the nod that a project's going to go ahead, and then it'll be, you know, all hands to the pump, and you end up sort of speeding up to get things going, but that's when you know, you're rushing headlong into poor planning, and you can be, you know, putting the pressure on for the rest of the project basically if you don't slow down to speed up at the beginning. And I also think that, you know, I mean, quantity surveyors, you need to kind of unlearn what you've learned as well, because you need to understand the impact, but you need to realize that when we're looking at budgets and cost, it isn't just notes on a piece of paper. And that was very much something that I experienced when I was quantity surveyor. It is kind of, you know, someone's livelihood. The impacts can be massive. And subcontractors, you know, you can look at how to maximize your profit. Look at the type of clients that you're working for. Who are the good ones? Who are the ones that are paying you? Who've got the best payment terms as well? But also get the price right, because if you don't, then, you know, you're obviously going to create more problems and more pressures on your own cash flow as well. But there's things that you can do to sort of save money. Look at your processes and procedures. Where are you wasting time and resources? Look at your waste, you know, eliminating waste. That can have a massive impact on your cash flow as well. Minimizing the risk with programs and robust contracts as well. Looking at how you can use technology to improve productivity. Focus on well-being as well, and also get the help and support that you need. If you're struggling, like, find the help. There are people out there who can sort of help and support you as well. And also, you know, the question about how do we design this out? I think as an industry, there needs to be more support in signposting how to help small businesses, to help them build stronger, more resilient businesses. And this is something I have been raising at high level in the industry. So I'm on one of the working groups for the Construction Leadership Council for the repair, maintenance, improvement sector. And this is something I'm talking about a lot, which is the support that these small businesses need in building stronger businesses. Because a lot of them might just go from being on the tools to all of a sudden, you know, being a business owner, and they just haven't got the skills. And also, finally, Mates in Mind are a construction charity, and they're actually going to be doing some research into the pressures on the mental health of small businesses. So it's estimated that there's 1 million people either working for themselves or for small and micro businesses within the construction and manual trade sector at the moment. And there's very little research about these people because they're really hard to reach. So they're looking at, you know, the challenges that are being faced and what can be done about it, basically. And I guess the question is, you know, what will you do? How can you change how you do business so that you're not impacting on people's mental well-being further down the line? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Really, really useful, really interesting, and a very different perspective to some of the other speakers we've had today. And just one point that really stood out for me was when you mentioned about people just coming straight off the tools and suddenly now running a business. You know, it's a very different world, isn't it? So some really useful tips and advice, and thank you very much for that. Okay, everybody, we've got our final presenter and panelist for this afternoon. I'm delighted to welcome Jo Kent from the Humber Coast and Vale Health and Care Partnership, who's going to talk about suicide prevention, particularly from the perspective of the work that Jo and her team are doing in the Humber region. And of course, the Humber Bridge has been very much in the news recently. So, Jo, over to you.
Thank you very much, Steve. So as Steve says, I'm Jo Kent. I'm the Suicide Prevention Programme Lead for Humber Coast and Vale Health and Care Partnership. And for those that aren't familiar, this is the Humber Coast and Vale. So we cover North Yorkshire, York, East Riding, Hull, North East Lincolnshire and North Lincolnshire. So that's a population of around 1.7 million. As you can see, it's quite a large geographical area that I cover. And on our programme, we decided that we needed to have some priorities, and these were pretty much led by NHS England, and we set 3 priorities. One was men, one was mental health services, and one was self-harm. So I'm going to take you through a little bit about what we're doing in each group. So our first group is men. So what have we been doing to try and reduce suicides with this group? We've been working with a number of community groups right across the Humber Coast and Vale. And that includes many of our grassroots projects. It includes working with some sporting partners, Hull FC, Hull City of Boxing, York Knights, Grimsby Town, Hull Kingston Rovers. So we've got all kinds of sporting people involved with us, and what they've been doing is providing groups to men in their local community, and that's been a mix of activity based but also working in terms of focusing on mental health, raising awareness around mental health, so that men are able to talk in a kind of a safe environment really, and doing things that they enjoy at the same time. We then took it one step further, and we wanted to deliver a men-only service, and we was not quite sure how to do that and didn't feel that we should be leading on that. So again, we did a number of focus groups with local men, and we presented to them Quell, which is an online mental health service that's anonymous. It's 24/7. It's easy access. You can do it in the comfort of your own home. You don't have to go to the GPs. There's no waiting lists. And we put this proposal to them, and the men thought that it was an excellent service and one that they would use. The thing that they really liked about it was the community part of the Quell service, where men can go on there and share their stories. So they might put examples on of a situation that they was in and how they got through that situation. And 92% of our men felt that that would be really helpful to them. The next one is mental health services, so continuously seeking to improve the safety and quality. Shared learning, so that's bringing all of the mental health providers across Humber Coast and Vale together to share any kind of learning, and to promote the 72-hour follow-up, and to complete the NKISH toolkit, which looks at a number of factors, including stability of staff. It talks about ligature points, and there's 10 points to this standard, and currently all of our mental health services are completing that. So we've got some kind of baseline of where services are and where they need to be working towards. The self-harm pathway, we need to understand the profile around self-harm across the Humber Coast and Vale footprint, and this has proved a little bit tricky. So there's a number of things going on here. We already have the information from one of our acute providers. So our mental health liaison service that works in from Huth in the Hull and East Riding area are giving us information on a monthly basis about presentations into the acute hospitals. So that's the emergency department and wards as well. I'm also working with South Yorkshire and Bassetlaw with a number of organisations, including the police, including NHS England, including YARS, to see how we can really understand this data, but how we can get it more easily as well. It's very difficult to pull all this information together. Feels like it should be an easy task, but it is very challenging. And our third part about this is about providing a non-clinical self-harm service across the Humber Coast and Vale, not only to people with lived experience, but to their families and loved ones as well. We feel it is so important for people to be able to understand about self-harm, but also to be able to support and to receive support if you're supporting somebody. So we're just working with a Harrogate company, and they're going to be doing all of the self-harm engagement with people with lived experience. But we also have another number of work streams, and that is around communication and engagement. And I think it's fair to say this has been one of our biggest work streams, where we've engaged with the public, with local businesses, and we roll out training. I sometimes go out there and provide the training myself, or we just do it from the www.talksuicide.co.uk, and it is the Zero Suicide Alliance training. It takes approximately 20 minutes, and we're really trying to promote this amongst our communities, because it really could help prevent further deaths if people are able to spot the signs, to speak about suicide and to signpost on. Again, that doesn't mean to say that we can save everybody. Sometimes we just do not see the signs, and they're just not there at all. So this is about balance, but there are people out there that we do feel that we can help. And I certainly get emails from training saying, I put the training to good use and actually I saved a life. We've now trained 10,000, it's around 10,400 people at our last count, but that was a number of weeks ago now. We've also been working on reducing suicide in public places, and I'll go and speak about that. And acute trust, again, this has been a bit more difficult to really get this group up and running just because of COVID really. But what we have done is in the North Lincolnshire and North East Lincolnshire area, we're just piloting, or we've just commissioned a service for people to use a Samaritan's line. And the rest of the services, prison and criminal justice system, drug and alcohol, they've just started. So we can let you know maybe later on how those work streams are going. And I've already covered men. So we've been trying to tackle suicides at the Humber Bridge. And this has been a piece of work that we've been doing over a number of years, looking at the restriction of footpaths at night, staff safety, data collection, frequent attendees, that's people that attend the bridge frequently that are feeling distressed, and an intervention takes place with one of the bridge staff. We're trying to look at how we can work more closely with our mental health partners, and that's an ongoing piece of work that we're doing currently. So that is around communication, and allowing the individual as well to know that we are working together to support them and trying to come up with more creative ways and other kinds of sources of support. The media, that's been a challenge, especially over the last couple of months, and looking at a culture change and the perception of mental health within the workplace. We've had a number of what we call EMDIs, emotionally distressed individuals, and we've been monitoring that over the years. This did slow down somewhat during COVID, but as the restrictions have been released, we've seen a surge of people coming forward that have been emotionally distressed and visiting the bridge. So what? We try not to talk about the Humber Bridge on its own. We try and look at suicides across the area. So we had a death in the Princess Quay. So we've worked alongside some of our shopping centres, looking at site specification, specific action plans. We've done training. We've looked at the no grab policy. We've introduced locations and encouraged sharing of learning. We've worked very closely now with the City Centre CCTV control room, which gives a rich data really about where we might have places in the city of Hull that perhaps distressed people attend. So what are our achievements? We've put together a Together service, and that's for people that have been bereaved by suicide. That went live May last year. There is the MERT service for North Yorkshire and York that was already up and running. So now right across Humber Coast and Vale, we have a service for those that have been bereaved or affected by suicide. This is also for professionals as well. We now have real-time surveillance, so when the police go out there and suspect a suicide, that they are able to inform our public health leads, but also we're able to know the bereavement services are able to be notified as well, so they can act immediately. And we've gone one step further and we've commissioned Quez, which is a more sophisticated suicide surveillance system. Our campaign and branding is really getting quite known now, but we need to do more. We need to push on that. Training 10,000 people, I feel is a really good achievement, but again, I'm never satisfied. I want a lot more people to take this training. The Quell for men's service, so again, very bespoke to men from 18 upwards. We did a number of webinars in November, and we was awarded with the High Sheriff Award. So what's next? Suicide learning panels quarterly to learn from deaths and identify key areas for improvement. setting our priorities for our final year, ensuring sustainability. That's got to be key this year, because whatever we do, it's unlikely my post will be there from July next year. So we need to make sure that these programmes are sustainable. Women are our priority, as are children and young people. And just to invite everybody along to we've been collaborating with East Sussex and Urban Scale Interventions to do a Safer Public Spaces network that is going to be both national and international. We've had our first meeting, which was a great success, and we'll be having our second one in May, and we would love for you to join us.
Thank you, Jo. Really interesting. I think a couple of things, just take away from that. You say it's not just about the Humber Bridge, obviously it's about the other locations you mentioned, the quay, the shopping centres, the whole design issue of making those areas safe is really, really important. Really like the idea of the learning panels that you're having quarterly. I think, it's really important that we learn from these experiences and move forward. And yeah, just a little saddened to hear that your post may not be there come next year. Obviously all kinds of political discussions maybe around that one, but thank you, Jo. Really an important way to end our panel for today in terms of the presentation. So really appreciate you coming along today.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.